I'd like to remind you that for more Microsoft Webcast, you can go to microsoft.com/webcast. Thanks again for joining us for today's presentation, IT Manager Webcast, Windows Server 2008 R2, Making the Business Case. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's host, Tim Vander Kooi. Tim, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much, Sydney, and welcome everyone. It's thrilled to have you with us again today. And today we're going to be talking about Windows Server 2008 R2, and we're going to talk about what the business case is there and why it does make good sense for our businesses to be upgrading to Windows Server 2008 R2. Today's guests, we have two guests with us today, one from Microsoft, Kevin Watt, who's a product manager. We're going to go ahead. I'm going to turn the floor over to Kevin for a second and let him introduce himself.
Great. Thanks very much, Tim, and to all the folks on the phone or the live meeting, thanks so much for joining us. It is absolutely my pleasure to be here. I'm a product manager on the Windows Server family, currently focused on working with our ISVs and application compatibility with the R2 launch, general availability soon. And in the past, also worked on SBS and the EBS launches last year. Back to you.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to have you with us, Kevin. And personally, I haven't worked with SBS and EBS in the past. That's really great. Love both those products too, and glad you could join us today. Our second guest today is Derek Scholand, who was with us for the Windows 7 webcast that we did a couple weeks ago, and Derek has joined us again. And Derek, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little about yourself?
Thanks, Tim. I'm a systems administrator for a malting company in Wisconsin, and we currently do approximately 50 desktops and 13 servers. And my goal today is to learn a little bit about Server 2008 R2 and also help you guys learn some stuff. So thanks for attending. Back to you, Tim.
Great. Thank you very much. Glad you could both be with us there, Kevin and Derek. And I'm just going to go real quick over again. Please be aware of the Q&A box at the top or the menu at the top, and please do submit your questions. We're going to look to get those answered real time throughout the presentation today. And we want to try to make this just as real world as possible, try to get your questions asked and answered regarding what you want to know around Windows Server 2008 R2, and also part of the presentation today will be over also Windows 7 and how the two products are just really, really a great solution put together. So be sure to be aware of that Q&A piece. And then that being said, we're going to go over today just some brief pieces of how Windows 7 and Server 2008 R2 are really a better solution when they're used together. They don't have to be, but there are real business reasons for doing that. We're going to hit on what the business case is for just Server 2008 R2 on its own. And again, we're going to be going over your questions, getting those answered throughout the presentation. I don't think I really need to go over what the actual business case here is so much, because Kevin's going to be covering a lot of this throughout his time talking here this afternoon or morning if you're on the West Coast. But we're just going to talk about some of the improved support and productivity answers that are there when using Windows 7 and Server R2 together, and just some of the really great new features that are in Server 2008 R2. So that being said, Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to Derek. And Derek, if you could just go ahead and if you have any questions or anything around Server, the new Server product, or if you have anything you've used or seen around Windows Server and Windows 7 put together now, I'd love to have you take that, and then Kevin will move to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Tim. I have been playing with the R2 release for a little while now, and most of the stuff I've seen are just features that I really like. It seems more stable to me than Windows Server 2003, at least in the environments in which I've seen it. And some of the features, including branch cache and direct access, which we'll get to in a little while, and Kevin's probably going to go over those at length, or at moderate length. Those two features are outstanding and can really move businesses forward in terms of how their employees access resources. So with that, I'm going to give the floor to Kevin, and we can get started.
All righty. So let's jump right in. All right. So I figured we'd go ahead and start with the slide there just a little bit out there. So let's start with the Windows 7 and Windows 2008 R2 Better Together. So for those of you who have been around for a while, you know that Microsoft likes to use that whole better together phrase, sometimes quite liberally. I'm happy to inform everyone that, in this case, better together is not just a marketing story at all. There are things that are in Windows 7, and those features do not light up without R2 as the back end. So, especially for those folks who are also advocating desktop upgrades to their management or their customers, if you happen to be a partner, there's a definite real story there. So the big things to highlight in terms of what is better together in R2 and Windows 7 are kind of highlighted on this slide here. There's virtualization, huge topic, huge piece, and we'll talk a little bit through that in a second. Specifically, what are we talking about with virtualization and how does that apply on the desktop? Also, branch cache, a brand new feature in Server 2008 R2 and Windows 7. Remote desktop services, formerly known as terminal services for those who are not new to Microsoft lingo. And then direct access is another feature that's brand new in R2 and Windows 7. And so, kind of a cool thing is that most of the folks out there are going to hear about branch cache and direct access probably through Windows 7, but then there are these things that are directly linked in R2 that either enhance or turn on the features there. So starting with branch cache, if this were a live audience, I'd ask how many people have heard of that. So I'm just going to assume that everyone's nodding their heads and raising their hands. But so branch cache is a really cool new technology that helps customers both be more productive, get at things faster, as well as save money on the back end. So the way to think about branch cache is to try to eliminate the number of trips that packets or information has to make around a network, especially in a WAN scenario. So, you can tell from the name, branch cache, that we're thinking remote offices and physically separated sites. So a simple way to illustrate branch cache in action might be to think about, I'm over here in Bellevue, Washington, or Redmond, kind of near the corporate campus. Somebody down in Florida, let's say we have an office and a sales group there. If I publish a PDF and somebody from Florida downloads that, or if I have a classroom that I'm teaching over live meeting with 50 people and they all go download that PDF, that had to make the trip from Redmond to Florida 40 times, assuming I have no geographic distribution of my servers. So branch cache, actually placing a Windows server in each of those locations, as the clients request the information, that PDF, the server will pick that up, will make the request, grab it, and then store it. And so the Windows 7 client, the first person who makes the request, has to get an actual download. But all of the following requests from that location are just going to talk to that local server. So in some sense, you can kind of think of it like the classic proxy. But because it's very intelligent and very smart and works in the network layers, it's not just for web pages. So this works with your SharePoint documents. This works with file shares, all of those things. So from a functionality perspective, it's pretty cool because it means less delay, especially if you've got you're like an architecture firm downloading big CAD files back and forth across the network in multiple sites across the country. It can just be a tremendous productivity improver. And then on the cost side, and there's always that angle, it's just tremendous in the sense that all of the bandwidth saving, that just gets translated right back. So good stuff there. Direct access is another new feature that is in Windows 7 and gets turned on by 2008 R2. And direct access is kind of the alternative to